Welcome back and moving on to our first segment for today. Well, we are talking about the economic status of Egypt and the efforts exerted by the Egyptian leadership to attract more foreign investments in different domains. Like, for example, when we talk about mining or the mineral wealth resources and giving it more care and attention so as to put it in the position it deserves. We all know that the potentiality in the Egyptian market is great and we have a lot of things to be discussed. First, allow me to welcome our guest for today, Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Shams University. Doctor, good morning. So before we start talking about the economic status in Egypt, I would like to shed the light also on the mineral wealth resources. We know that we have 3 companies recently in a bid when it comes to mining, and we talked a lot about mining before and how it is important to the Egyptian economy.
Yes, indeed, mining is quite important for the Egyptian economy. Why? Because nowadays when we are trying to enhance the competitiveness of our industrial sector to be an engine of growth for Egypt. Unfortunately, the industrial sector is sharing only with 10% to generate GDP in Egypt. Regardless the potentialities of such sector, since this sector can absorb a lot of employment, and from here it comes the importance as well as its importance in export to penetrate international markets and so on. So mining can be regarded as a very important cornerstone towards enhancing the competitiveness of investment. We used to talk about mining, without actually having significant steps to attract investment, because our investment in mining is still very poor. We don't have, for example, multinationals, and this sector needs technology, so we need to transfer technology by multinational, and still we had that the golden triangle in that link Red Sea with Upper Egypt. It was actually a very promising project in which the visibility study has been done in order to extract several minerals in this area, and these minerals can be as raw materials for the industrial sector instead of importing, and we have problems in our balance of trade. We have severe deficit in our balance of trade, and nowadays after COVID-19 and the Ukrainian-Russian war, it becomes essential for every economy to start to think about self-sufficiency of the basic needs, and minerals as a source of raw materials can be regarded as very important sectors that we have to concentrate on it. So this news regarding attracting investments, regardless that we are talking about gold, in this bidding, but still gold is quite important. It has been quite successful. We have a very important company, Mean, and in working in Red Sea, and they are doing quite well. So having a bidding for more projects, this is a very good potentiality for minerals. I hope that this will be extended to other types of minerals, since these minerals, and according to our geographic data regarding the potentialities of mining in Egypt, still we have a lot of unexploited potentialities for minerals. So hopefully this can be a start up towards attracting more investment for exploiting our minerals.
Right, just also as taking it into consideration, we know that the Egyptian General Authority for Mineral Resources stated that 8 areas were assigned to 4 English, Canadian and Egyptian companies.
Yes.
So if I'm talking in general, talking about raw materials, for example,
Yes.
in Egypt, and whether we're talking about mining or the all this sector, this important sector, talking about it as exporting parts or manufacturing as well, and the benefit of this
Yes.
on Egypt.
Yes.
So are we going only to concentrate on the raw materials or taking benefit of
No.
our raw materials, so taking it from A to Z?
Of course, with minerals, we have to add petrochemicals, and Egypt has done quite well regarding petrochemicals. Still ahead, we have a lot to be done regarding enhancing our industries in petrochemicals and coordinating with our, neighbor Arab countries. And this is a very important step that we need to enhance Arab economic cooperation, return to activate, we have an agreement, a free trade area among Arab countries, so we have to activate this free trade area since the crisis that we have been through last period proved that, regional integration can become a very important, source for us in order to address these problems. So by having more economic Arab coordination, and lately we had a very important event by, referring to a very important cooperation among Egypt and United Arab Emirates and Jordan to have a gathering, economic gathering, in order to inject investment into the three countries and have a coordinated effort in mutual investment that build on comparative advantage and addressing the potentialities of investment in the three countries. So by designing projects taking into consideration resources existing and contemplating each other to enhance our competitiveness on a regional perspective, this is a very important step that needs to be enlarged into most Arab countries so that we can exploit our resources. Arab countries, they are suffering from unemployment, from poverty, unexploited resources. Still, despite all efforts to diversify economies of Arab countries, we are still relying on some sectors like Gulf countries. They are still relying on oil, for example, to a large extent. So by diversification and by coordinating our efforts to exploit our resources on a global matter, I believe this is very, very important step to address the challenges we are confronting nowadays.
So the challenges are huge. And of course, if we're talking nowadays, we can see many of the countries, the major countries or the big countries suffering again from economic crisis, suffering from unemployment. So I'm talking now about Arab countries, talking about Egypt. For sure, the challenges will be more and huge. So when it comes to attracting more foreign investments, for example, what are the tools and how can we work more on this during all these challenges facing the world?
First of all, we have to identify our comparative advantage. Still, we need more promotion for the capabilities of the Egyptian economy. After these years, starting from 2016, from the beginning of the economic reform, Egypt succeeded to extend, the opportunities of investment by having very solid and strong infrastructure connecting Sinai to Egypt, connecting, Upper Egypt into other parts, connecting the new valley. All these are representing very important potentialities for profitable investment. So first of all, we have to identify our potentialities and promote ourselves in a good way. Unfortunately, this period, it's not actually, we are suffering as the world economy is suffering from these wars that affected to large extent, the attractiveness of all countries of the world, since uncertainty is, gaining momentum with this trouble environment. But still, taking into consideration the Middle East, taking into consideration that your geographic position as linking the two worlds of the East and West, so you have a very good options and potentialities and opportunities to attract investment in different fields, like you mentioned, in minerals, in the industrial sector, trade in services, electronics, and so on. So this is first of all. Second, you know, and on parallel with this promotion, we need to enhance the environment of investment. Still, we had severe challenges confronting, you know, investors, all investors, Arab, Egyptians, and foreigner investors. So we need to enhance this environment. And, you know, lately several steps have been done in order to change the atmosphere of investment. You know, first of all, our Prime Minister and our President, they emphasize the importance of addressing all obstacles confronting investors. Several meetings have been done and decisions have been taken in order to you know, to address such obstacles. Besides, a unit has been formed in Prime Minister in order to follow the obstacles and problems confronting investors and try to solve it immediately so that we can enhance the environment. But besides that, we need first of all to stabilize our environment, which means that to stabilize decisions and procedures taken by ministers. And I believe a very significant step has been taken by our Prime Minister is that any minister shouldn't take or any procedures without referring first of all to the Prime Minister so that we can coordinate effort, because we witnessed for the last period different conflicts, decisions and procedures that have been taken, and without neglecting completely the impact on investors, the impact on the cost of production. And this actually resulted in increasing seriously the cost of production for most producers. And from here it comes that this can be regarded as a very important obstacle that nowadays they are trying to solve it. Besides that, we have, you know, doing business index, competitiveness index. We have to refer to the obstacles regarding, you know, the environment of investment and to address it properly so that to attract these investors. Egypt has succeeded to attract, despite that Egypt can be considered the second and the first country in Africa to attract foreign direct investment, but only we had $13 billion last year, which is quite minimal compared to the opportunities existing to attract more and more investments.
Doctor, talking also about the Arab countries and our cooperation, and let me take, for example, the recent meeting that took place recently on the cooperation between United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Egypt, because here the initiative of the economic sustainable development is also of crucial importance during such a critical period of time.
Yes, indeed, I agree with you, and specifically that we are nowadays preparing for COP27. Egypt is preparing and, you know, doing and exerting efforts in order to be ready for this very important meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh. I believe what we are doing nowadays as not only the government, ministries, but also the civil society. Civil society, as a professor in university, our universities are exerting nowadays efforts in order to specify, you know, what projects we need to address in order to, you know, address, you know, climate change. We all know that we have two types of activities under two important pillars, mitigation and adaptation. And COP26, actually, the results of COP26, you know, were quite important for us to analyze what we are in deep need of. COP26 proved that developing countries that are suffering mostly by the climate change impact, and this impact has been amplified by the Russian-Ukrainian war, since the most important thing nowadays that we are going to suffer for is food security. Completely food security is jeopardized by all these events. And climate change is affecting food security for mostly needed people, specifically, in Africa. So hunger is becoming, and this is one of the most important, goal of the 17 sustainable goals, addressing poverty, addressing hunger, and with all these challenges, you need more efforts, not only from developing countries, but from developed countries that are responsible for emissions, and they are responsible for this climate change, and they have to assume their responsibilities towards the world economy. Besides, you have to add that developed countries and Western countries have been responsible for the war of Ukraine-Russia. And they are responsible nowadays for the danger for famine that is going to be, jeopardizing to a large extent African, specifically African and some Asian countries, regarding the security of food and to how extent people there are going to be affected by that. So I believe that we need to discuss these challenges properly enough. And Egypt is having nowadays a big responsibility to represent the African continent, to specify the main challenges confronting African economies, and to how extent we can address these challenges by we need transfer of technology to best allocate our resources and use our resources to secure our food and medicines, taking into consideration all these diseases that are going to be affecting specifically African countries nowadays. When monkeys boxes that are nowadays spreading, most countries affected by this is African economies, the African countries. So nowadays they are going to be in need for medicines and vaccination. Imagine that African continent and most African countries that they are vaccinated only by 14%. Imagine that. And some vaccines are destroyed in some developed countries by multinationals so that their prices cannot be reduced. So imagine to how extent we are talking about our responsibilities in this period of challenges that we have to confront.
Right. Just to continue talking about economic status in Egypt, but just allow us to move on into a very short break, then we'll be back. And still we are talking about the economic status in Egypt and all the efforts exerted by the Egyptian leadership to attract more foreign investments. And Doctor, when we talk about investments, of course, we have to talk about the role of the private sector. And a very good attention has been given to the private sector, and many decisions have been adopted or taken recently for the private sector, opening the way for them. And we all know that without the private sector, we cannot do all things alone.
Yes, and unfortunately, like our Prime Minister mentioned in the international conference to specify the new rules for economic activities for the coming period, our plan for the coming period, he mentioned quite well that the private sector has witnessed severe decrease during the last period, and from here it comes that the role of private sector only has been 35%. And our goal for the coming period, as the government goal for the coming period, is to increase this share into 65, which means that they have to exert a lot of efforts in order to, address the environment for investment, in order to, facilitate the procedures and enhancing the capabilities for like what we can call institutional reform, because the potentialities is quite good. The informal sector nowadays in Egypt is huge, and they are facing severe problems. So if you can support this informal sector to be transformed into formal, I believe this is only can add quite well to the role of the private sector. Besides what we have been just talking about, foreign direct investment, and our investors, our Egyptian investors, they have a lot of capability. Imagine that when we have the 18% saving rate of saving in the two banks in Egypt, imagine that these two banks have attracted approximately 700 billion Egyptian pounds. So imagine to how extent we have a capability for savings, but these savings, are not allocated in the best way towards investments. So I believe that this is should be a very important goal for us for the coming period, to ease the atmosphere. And in order to increase the share of the private sector, we have a lot to be done regarding that. And I believe that there is now intention, good intention. We can see, different efforts that are going to be done for the coming period regarding different sectors, how to attract investment. Like for the agriculture sector, we used to have, mega project, directed and led by the government or the army in such huge investment. Nowadays, we are talking about how to offer opportunities in this, like for greenhouses, for example. There is a lot of opportunities to try to offer more chances for small business in order to come and to share. And nowadays there are several, opportunities for IPO in several of these huge projects. So this is going to offer more opportunities for the private sector, for small business, but we need to arrange ourselves. We need to offer incentives. We need to train people so that they can be able to benefit from such opportunities and to be successful after that. It's not only by benefit. We need to revise all our, plans regarding clusters, our industrial clusters. You can see, Nashwa, that we have clusters in different geographic areas. Like in Damiati, we have a very large area of furniture production. Still, our export from this area, despite that we spend billions in these areas, our export is only 200 billion, 200, fortunately that is going to be 200 billion, but only $200 million. So this telling you to how extent there are question marks regarding our arrangement, our capabilities to use our resources. So this is what we have to address properly on a geographic area. What are the clusters related to our comparative advantage in different geographic area? And all these studies are ready. I am, as economist, I can tell you that I have participated in such studies in different fields, and I shared in other studies. So we have everything. What we need to do is to implement, is to be serious in implementation, is to monitor and evaluation what we are doing so that we can have results on the ground.
Right. Dr. Youmn Hamaki, Professor of Economics at Ain Shams University, thank you very much for joining us. And with this, we come to the end of our first segment, but still we have more to bring you on our breakfast show. So let's move on to a quick break, then we'll be back.